Cool. Now, before we get started in the debate, I want to show you one diagram that I've been working on that I think might be helpful to kickstart the conversation, because it does summarize a lot of the things that I think a lot of platform engineering initiatives are getting wrong. And I am of the firm opinion that we are rapidly approaching the, as my dear fragile friends at Gartner call it, trough of disillusionment, with a good amount of platform engineering initiatives go wrong. And if you ask me what the key driver of this thing is going wrong is, why these things are going wrong then two big things. Number one, they don't understand that platform engineering is a multiplayer game. And number two is they get adoption wrong. On number one, I've thought about this value pyramid. So on the bottom, you have pain. And the things that we're seeing most often, also in the pain points that we get reflected from users is or from customers if they come to us, and we, like, just to give you like a rough idea of scale. So we start a platform engineering initiative at the moment around every 3 days with a company with more than 500 developers. So we see like a lot of these different things and at what point they're coming. And they're all coming to us with, we have high cognitive load for our developers, missing self-service for our developers, waiting times for our developers, slow. And there's always like for our developers. So they're extremely focused on the developer as the primary persona. What's so important is that you make sure that the infrastructure and operation teams have a seat on the table and you hear them as early as possible. So because first of all, they have pain points as well. They have like ticket ops where they get repetitive requests. They need to go through manual reviews. They have low standardization. And if you don't think about that from day one, then you're designing systems that are not really, system architectures that aren't really meeting that problem. So for instance, and I have a talk at PlatformCon where I'm going to talk about this. I'm just going to show you that quickly now. This here is infrastructure Tetris. So this is very often the design that I see with platforms. They're going in, they're building like a nice user interface with a scaffolding functionality where people can start clicking. And then they have an infinitely deep bucket of cloud resources that never ends. And then developers click, 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 and build more resources. And the developer is super happy, and the infrastructure teams are increasingly depressed because they are the ones that have to maintain all of this. So that's a standard architectural design where we're not taking into consideration that it's not only about the developers. And if we now finalize this pyramid here, I think what you have to do is that, especially in the design of the platform engineering group, like right from the start, both groups have to bring their ambassadors if you want. You have the developers, and I call them DevX platform engineers. Those are the people that really think about how do we design the interaction method with the dev teams and the product teams. And we have the infrastructure platform engineers, and both drive automation and standardization, and they serve, and I think that's the next thing that's so important, and they serve the organization, and they bring down time to market, they bring down cost, and they bring innovation up. And if we can't measure this, then we'll have a problem. Before we talk about adoption, Matthias, how do you think about these things? And because I know that you've been there, right?
The journey of my life, so to say.
Exactly, yeah.
No, Kaspar, you never saw the internal developer platform, the first one I created, but it was exactly what you mentioned. Like you have your self-service menu. We provided a bunch of 80 backings, so to say, so engineers could click anything, but the main problem was it was not 100% automated, and it was not 100% standardized. So we ended up that there was a huge platform organization necessary to maintain the whole stuff. The entropy of the system is too high because low standardization and pure automation. So you always had manual work. It always took longer as expected. You always had discussions with the teams because they used services and designed solution architectures which maybe did not fully fulfill what the platform team so expected from the product, so to say. And this was the main reason to say, if I do it a second time, I do standardization and automation from the very beginning. So this was the approach of Bauhaus. But so meanwhile, it took me 1.5 years, but I would say everything is more or less highly standardized and automated. But it's also a painful journey because you have to develop the developers to stick to these guidelines, to collaborate with the platform team, so to say. And we also said that maybe the automation parts are not written centrally, they are written by the teams, but they need to fulfill the defined standards from the platform. So that's a very painful journey. But I would never, ever do it differently. So being fast in creating abstraction to developers and providing developer experience was at the beginning main goal. But meanwhile, I would say, look on standardization and automation. You will pay it later. Maybe you are fast, but you never ever come to a state where you say, now everything runs smoothly, everyone has understood how it works, we all stick to the same standards, and that's for me the main learning. So I totally, so it's not a marketing thing, Kaspar, but this is exactly what my personal journey looked like.
Yeah. And so to dissect this a little bit, because I think we're pinpointing one of the key problems. And I mean, I've been observing your journey for a while, and just to, and we can't name any numbers, but we're looking at your first. I mean, you're doing scale, right? I think you're in the billions of transactions on that marketplace. The first platform you built was a 7-digit budget, right? So we're looking at a pretty decent
Eight
size.
digits.
8-digit, yeah.
8-digit budget.
Yeah,
yeah, you can burn money because you need people to solve the problems, and
Yeah.
and you focus on onboarding of developers. So Kaspar, maybe one sentence, and this
Yeah.
kills you later. You standardize the onboarding process, but you haven't standardized the whole platform, and that kills you later.
Right. And so what's so interesting is so the first thing that you built, essentially, if I got this correctly, you had that you had that abstraction level, but then you were essentially focused on day one operations, right? Day zero, create something, and then it was Wild West, essentially, right? And then you need operation teams, and you need the platform teams to keep up with that.
Yeah.
And actually, and so that means, and to make it quite to make it very obvious, it means that essentially, and I'm seeing this a lot, the platform teams become operation teams, and they have to scale linearly with the amount of developers, and you don't want that. Like in a good setup, you want developer growth on the platform to be heavily detached from the base of the platform team. Otherwise,
Exactly.
you have a problem, right? And that levels out at some point. I've not seen, frankly, many successful platforms with more than 500 to 1,000 developers. They, at this point, and we had a great discussion with one of Intuit, a guy at Intuit, they have 3,500 developers. They have 4 different platforms. A platform has to be cut into a certain domain set of applications, right? But now that you're doing it in the higher degree of standardization, what does that do to the organization? Does that, does that lead to, is that now, smooth sailing? Does that lead to tension?
Yeah, good question. No, so it's 2 questions, Kaspar. So maybe I can give some figures. So the first platform I went live after 6 months. After 1.5 years, I had 1,500 internal developers on this platform. So it worked. Don't get me wrong, it somehow worked. But we put a lot of money in, and I had 60, 70 people to create the whole thing and to bring it to production and then to scale it. And their assumption always has been, we will reduce the 70 people maybe to 10 or 15 people because it's a platform, and as soon as it's built, it's maintained, it's developed a little bit, it grows maybe a little bit, but you can reduce the the people for sure. But this never happened. So it was more the discussion later on, do we not need 80 or 90 people to support this 1,500 users? The second time, just to give you a comparison, it's 3 or 4 people which are running the platform, and this is stable. It's not more or less people, because everything is standardized and automized. So the platform I'm currently having it's stable, but the number of users increases. So I have exactly this decoupling you mentioned in your question, but and that's the different thing. So the first approach is easier because everyone somehow gets something in the UI, and managers understand UI, and they can click around and you see a lot and so on. But you so to say, you get the pain later. The other approach, automation from the very beginning, was like, I had so many discussions with developers, engineers. So why do we have to do that? Why do we have to write this Terraform modules? Why do we have to stick to all the standards and so on? You have the pain at the beginning, but you need to educate your people. You need to give them the time they need to understand what they are really doing there. And it also took me 1.5 years that I would say now we are in a situation, and it's like say it runs smoothly. So there are no more discussions. Everyone has understood how it works, what needs to be done, and it's not a topic anymore from management point of view. So you have no escalations, you have no incidents, you have no blaming from the engineers. It sorted it out. The beginning, first 6, 7, 8 months were pretty hard, but as soon as you reach one point, then everyone starts to understand, and they also start to profit from the capabilities they expect from a developer platform. And then it turns to, yeah, it runs smoothly. You hear nothing about it. Everyone is using it, and everyone is sticking to the standards. So even from a cultural point of view, I would say the second approach is better. Maybe it's harder at the beginning, but you get a common understanding how you produce software in the company or not.
And so I think there are two things that are at play here. So first of all, you understand very early that you need to think about the entire life cycle of a resource. We can really bring it down like this. Like if you build a platform where you click a button and then something creates, but you're not thinking about day 100, then you have a problem. You need to build a platform in a way, and that requires sophisticated logic handling, where the life cycle of the resource really gets governed by the platform from day one,
Yes.
from the time it gets up, right, to the time it gets destroyed. That has to be 100% automated and governed by a system and not by a human being. Like you cannot, yeah, that's number one.
You can.
Yeah, you can, right? You can
makes
always,
no sense.
yeah. So I always often hear like, we don't need this. We have operations people. So like, yeah, I mean, you of course, but you can, save 2/3 of the operations people if you don't. Yeah. So that's number one. The second thing that you get, and that is also something that nobody really realizes, is time and not being fast, right? So it like the first platform you built, you were there after 6 months. That is great, but that's too fast.
Yeah.
Because these things need time to sink in, and they need time to mature. So I think it's so important that like nobody in the world and is able to build a scaling, well-rounded platform in 6 months. It is not possible. And I know that there will be like daily there are teams starting that think that this is possible, but it's not possible. And so you have to understand that very early, and you have to also sensibilize your management for that, to say, this is going to cost time, and we are going to start very, very small. And that's why I'm such a fan of starting super small. The first 4 weeks, 8 weeks, you don't even have users on this. Product teams are looking over your shoulder, so they get familiar, and you're developing something, and you say like, hey, look, with this platform, you can do ephemeral environments or whatever. Then you go in and you take the first product team with maybe only 10 users, and you really build something for them that's absolutely amazing, and you spend another 3 to 4 months on this. To a degree where your managers go like, are you crazy spending so much resources, and like it feels like so much resources on so few people? But then you really nail this, and you have 10 people that are excited and really understand it. And then the growth is coming from within. And then the size of the platform team is detaching from the user growth.
Yeah.
And that's the inflection point that you need to hit. Right. This is so vital that, right?
Super important, Kaspar. So the first platform, yeah, after 6 months, but it was not even an MVP, and it was not fully automated. So we did manual stuff in the background. We just created the imagination that it's a fully automated platform, and this does not scale. So we have been fast, and you can always argue from a management and strategy point of view, maybe it's important to have this success to say, yeah, it just took us 6 months. But it led finally to a situation after 3 years, I would say, that the platform was still not part of the whole organization. It was still discussed because it did not meet the expectations everyone had.
Yeah, you are actually like a fascinating case, because very few people have gone through this, through this valley of sorrow so often. Are there any questions around these topics?
I've got one. So the platform, the standardized platform that you built, public cloud-based, sounded like. Was part of your standardization, did you limit the services that you would allow developers to use?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about like how you made choices about what to limit, and was there a lot of pushback? Like I'm just interested in that. Like, did you guys make a top-down decision, like we're going to limit to these services, or like can you talk about that?
Yeah, maybe I had a very good situation because my journey was on the one side build an engineering organization. So when I joined, we had maybe 5 up to 10 internal engineers. This was my starting team. Meanwhile, there are 200. So I staffed people especially for this top-down defined services and approach we had. So this also leads somehow to less discussions. Don't get me wrong. So my experience is it's always harder to convince a lot of engineers from that this very strict portfolio is the right one. This time it was a little bit different. So I said, if you join, this is our strict portfolio, and then there, being honest, have not been so much discussions. But also here, I would say that that's a good question. It depends a little bit from the culture you have in the company, how mature it is, and how it was managed in the past. So if engineers have a strong voice, I think you need to respect that. If you have a situation like me, so I personally would always prefer top down and be as strict as possible. So,
but that also is because you are first of all, you're a good manager, but you're also like a determined manager. And I think that's important, that the management is very clear in what they're saying. And that as an organization, you settle on, I call that a lowest common denominator tech stack. Like, you will not be able to build a platform across serverless, VM, Kubernetes with 800 different options. That's just not going to work. Like, and so you need to say, hey, it's 80-20. Here's the first product group. What are they using? We are going to focus on 80%. Like, I know I don't know. I know very few platforms with over 80% estate coverage, and that's fine. Platform engineering is fundamentally an 80-20 game.
We have a question, Kaspar, I think.
A beer?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a commentary. I agree with the approach around like locking down specific resource types, especially in the cloud where there are so many different options. One thing that's been successful on our end in terms of culture management around that was when it's going towards a production deployment, then there is a little bit more lockdown. But in order to allow innovation to happen at the product level or the development level, there are some guardrails around development and allow individuals and teams to prototype with newer capabilities. But once they feel like it is going to go towards production, engaging the platform organization to create the boundaries and like Matthias is saying, automation starting day one.
So don't get me wrong. I totally agree, Abir. Same we did here. So especially senior engineers, they want to try out, they want to look behind the scenes and so on. So we provided playgrounds where I would say you had a very big portfolio of potential services you can use. And then if you thought that maybe one of the services should be added to the production service layer, then there's still a request process. But the principle to manage the production environment is keep it as strict and decide it more or less. As you can name it top down. Later, I founded a community where every team was represented by a tech lead, and they should decide their portfolio. And I just said, so they then asked me, so can we have a database? And I said, no, we don't need it. So there's no reason for that. This was then the discussions. But the playground, which provides the whole capability stack, so to say, is also something we have.
I think that's vital. Yeah, that's a great comment. Yeah. Von Schwerter, I'm curious to know and discuss how to strategize and calculate, analyze cost estimation for implement integration new tools in the platform. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's also if we actually broaden that, how can you design the platform in a way where so we differentiate that between golden paths and going off the path, right? Golden paths is you're on the platform, off the path you're on your own. And first of all, if you want to nudge people to be on the golden path, I think it's a management thing, because you want to make it a little more painful to not be on the platform. That's another way. You can sticks and carrots. You can just say, you can be on your own, right? But then you also wake up at 3 a.m. and you fix the production outage. That's fine, but that's really up to you. And then and I think if you do it well, if we really sort of boil it down, the Lego blocks of the golden path should be repositories, right? So if a Lego block is give me a Redis, whatever, that Redis should be in a repository. And so that golden path should be a repository. That means changing, if you want to change that base module, we call those resource definitions, then you essentially fork that repository and you change your own parameter. By doing this, you're going off path. So, but then if you think this through, what you've also done is that as a platform team, you can say, hey, by the way, the best way to inform my strategy, to get to your question, Shweta, is to let reality inform it. And so if I see 20 of my developers regularly forking my Redis definition and changing 3 parameters, I might want to go look at this and go, okay, now we've actually reached a critical mass. We are going to support a second way of configuring Redis. And then we can bring those users back and bring them back on that standard. And so I think if you're building that, I call that standardization by design, you're building that into the flow, then you don't really need to strategize. You don't really need to do cost analysis. You can just watch the user, what the user is doing, and then react to that. I don't know, Matthias, does that make sense? How
Yeah.
are you going about this?
Yeah, I'm currently more thinking because so how to measure so the cost advantage, that I think that's one of the big problems still in place, because so if you use tools and so on, you pay licenses, and that's a line in your budget system and so on. You directly see it. The efficiency of your development teams and so on, this is something you do not directly see. So you have your personal cost, and this personal cost block is given independently whether they produce 2 or 10 apps, so to say. This doesn't count. So finally, you need to look at productivity and of the teams. And this is, I still have no master solution for that. I'm still trying to find ways to show that teams who have a high degree of standardization, automation, using platforms, especially centrally provided, fully automated and abstracted ones, have a higher productivity than teams who maybe left this golden path and do anything on their own. You get it a little bit with the, so to say, if you need the 24/7 reachability, so to say, you in Germany you need to enrich contracts, you have to pay people. So this is definitely a cost block you somehow can mention. But for me, it's the velocity of the teams. So how much time do they spend for incidents? How much time do they spend for rollbacks? So we are not rollbacking anything, but meanwhile, but so and then you have to look deeper. But it's not a clear thing. So you always need to discuss, and you get indirect KPIs from my point of view, where you can see, okay, maybe this team could be a little bit more productive if they change to a platform. But it's hard to explain managers who have no clue from technology and software delivery, so to say. That's still one of the main issues in my opinion.
100%, yeah.
I think
Keith, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering, how do you get, do you have like a set process for getting feedback from your users, your user base? And do you use a set product management process or methodology to get feedback from your users to manage your platform today? Like, do you use that to figure into feature roadmaps or any of that? Like, does that play into it?
Maybe maturity level 1, where have been personal chats between platform colleagues and engineering colleagues, and including all the classical engineering behavior. So this is bullshit. I don't want to have it. Can I have this? Can I have that? Why do I not get it? And so on. I think you all know the game. Then we created an overall channel. On the one side, I expected that people are a little bit more polite, and not everyone is somehow stating his personal problem. But then you have a exchange between platform and all engineers using it. But so then you have the problem, too much information is missing, because sometimes, so you all know, they start with memes and so on, and then you have thousands of lines. The real question somehow is not seeable anymore. And meanwhile, we then said, okay, we have a tech lead community, and they discuss the portfolio and what they request from the platform. So each product team is represented by a single person. All of these technology leads build a community, and they, together with the platform leads, so to say, operate the portfolio they provide.
Got it.
But I think it is such a good idea to have a product owner. Like we have a joke internally at our company. If a team comes with a product owner, the likelihood of them succeeding doubles. Like those are the ones that we take serious. Like the worst thing is, like you see a team with a couple backend engineers that have a management mandate to have that done in 3 weeks. You already know, okay, that's not going to go anywhere.
And not only in platform teams. So you need an owner. So we meanwhile, for new topics also, owner first. before you have engineers, you need someone who owns the topic.
Mm.
Do you have metrics to measure success? If so, like what? Is it developer uptake, or is it? I mean, you mentioned earlier like velocity, right? Like, are you doing both? Or are you saying? I mean, you said you had 1,500 developers, right? I think. So it's yeah.
Yes. If you're in Germany, it's always hard. So we don't have the same transparency, so to say, like outside of Germany. From a legal point of view, on the other side, so officially I'm not using anything because this would be people-related performance KPIs and so on, and this is in
Oh,
Germany.
that's
So,
right. Oh,
we don't
yeah.
like it, so to say.
Got it. Yeah.
But we are talking about tech, and nothing is more transparent than tech. So yeah, but I on the one side, so every team is using Jira, so for sure I can look a little bit on velocity and so on, but the intercomparability and I think you know the problem. The other thing is, so you look in GitOps, yeah, so how many commits and so on, how productive are people. So I know my guys, but um, I'm currently somehow refreshing Kokomo approaches because I want to clearly see how productive my teams are. But maybe Kaspar, this is something we can talk about in 3 or 4 months. I'm partnering with the Technical University of Munich because I said I want to prove something very scientific, and so I clearly want to have it. So productivity, but based on function points. So how much value do they produce, so to say?
Interesting. And Matt, you said you measure experiment velocity. What does that mean, or do you experiment with velocity?
We at Etsy, we run every change in production as an A/B test.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're pushing out dozens of experiments, dozens of production changes every day, dozens of experiments every week. And we built, before there were publicly available A/B experiment management platforms in the world, we built our own, and that's been the one that Etsy has used, for better or for worse, for a long time. One of the benefits of that is that we've been able to build a lot of observability tooling around that. So we can look over a period of time and see how many experiments each squad in product engineering shipped. And so that's one way that we can look at trends over time. We don't use it to evaluate performance or anything like that, but we can say, for instance, when we started releasing our mobile app weekly instead of every 2 weeks, we saw a jump in the experiments because native app developers could ship experiments twice as frequently. So that's like an obvious example. But that also lets us look at teams that are working in, for instance, more modernized parts of the code base, kind of on the paved path, versus teams that aren't. That lets us see patterns in their velocity. And experiment velocity is something that is pretty hard to game because the teams need to work with designers, analysts, product managers to come up with these experiments. So there aren't a lot of like dumb, trivial experiments they need to run, and no one gets a reward for shipping the most experiments either.
Kind of using your overall experiment in your final product, right? You're using the velocity for that and looking at your paved roads or your golden path template and seeing the difference between those two and saying, okay, well, if we get 50% more experiments on the paved path, then that's a measure of success for your platform being good. I mean, I made those numbers up, obviously, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a totally reasonable way to think about it. What we usually talk about in the platform layer, the enablement layer at Etsy, is that if we get if we enable more teams to work on the paved path for whatever they're doing, product engineering, ML, model development, then we'll expect to see their experiment velocity go up over time.
Got it. Cool, thanks.
Sure.
I'm actually experimenting with something at the moment because it's a question that we get a lot. And so because one of the problems is that we've always been looking at DORA, but the problem DORA is a lagging indicator, right? So it's not easy to measure, and it's only indirect correlation with costs. And everybody's asking for like, how much does this cost me? What do I get for it? And so here's something that we've started testing with the first, I think, 20 teams or something. And there's no name for it. So we focus on 4 metrics. Number 1 is an autonomy score. So just look, we take this as a proxy of the degree of self-service and workflow automation. And it's really trivial. We just take 1 divided by the total number of requests per year that the operation teams get. And so in terms of PRs or tickets or messages. And so we just accumulate this and measure. And then we do like a diff and diff measurement of before and after. Second is service create time. Like if you start now, how long does it take you to get a service ready for deploying to production, including all resources and configs? So all environments have to be up and running. And we take that as a proxy for workflow quality. Then onboarding time is the time to first PR or 10th PR of a new developer, and then a dev satisfaction score. And we always do like them diff and diff. And what we want to do next is trying to measure what were the net cost savings and can we correlate them with the results to then build return on investment calculations better. But we're not there yet. And I don't even know whether that framework works well, but it's an attempt. Shahab, I think there's a question for you. You're muted.
Yeah, and I was gonna say about developer productivity metrics. That's very interesting. I was gonna ask about DORA, so you did answer that. But it's really interesting seeing what you've shown there. I mean, at JPMC, there's a big conversation between improving like the pipelines and also knowing what pain points different teams are having. So in one team, you could have like long code reviews. On another team, it could be tooling. So the DORA really helps us identify those problems that we can focus on, in terms of making that easier for the developer versus, because developers also, when they see certain metrics, and I don't know, in Germany you couldn't show certain things, but this idea of corporate control or disciplining the developer, which, as soon as they see certain things, it's red flags go up. So, in design, in the language, mitigating against those kinds of things, a focus on, I think we're trying very hard to focus on the developer's well-being, having a well-being index, and then telling, trying to communicate. And then there's difficulty in this because the design or the metrics themselves communicate one thing, but you're trying to communicate, well, we're trying to understand better what we can do to make your tooling better, make your experience better. We know you want to go fast. We're assuming that, we'll let your manager deal with the performance review question, but these metrics are there not for that, but for improving your tooling and your overall experience. So I just want to know if anyone else had that kind of experience with displaying metrics.
And
not for us.
Go ahead, please. Keith, Germans can't really comment on this.
Officially.
Yeah, so it looks like Matt added something here.
Yeah, I'll say I think this is what you're talking about, but I like the approach that the DX survey folks, this is co-written by Abhinoda, who founded DX survey, GitDX. Yeah. I like their approach of like basically starting with the software engineers are the experts on their own experience. So let's ask them how we're doing, and then find some disciplined ways to track those answers over time. And that helps us get to metrics that are ideally actionable by the platform side and represent meaningful reality for the software engineers. So like, as an example, we've started using the DX survey quarterly at Etsy for the last few quarters, and paying attention to various scores. But one of them that's great to dig into is the weekly time loss score. And you basically ask every engineer, like, how many hours a week do you lose to these different things? And it's that, we don't have any fancy observability to measure these things. We're just asking engineers for their own estimates. And it turns out that we've been able to, establish a baseline, establish that it's kind of in line with a bunch of other DX survey customers, and figure out some ways to break that down so we can find ways to improve. And some of the things are hard to improve, like I have too many meetings. It's hard to do anything about that in the platform side. But waiting for builds, test suites, there are a bunch of things that we can dig into and find ways to improve.
Yeah, no, like I've seen that the Abinota and the DX product. And I really like the approach, and everything that you mentioned also is like it's a focus on the organizational performance, not individuals' performance or right. It's like, yeah.
There's
Yeah, I
actually nothing you can really. It would be hard to pull out any ideas about individual performance from the kinds of questions that we ask, that they get asked in those surveys. And I think that's a really nice layer of safety too.
But on team level, Matt. So
Dora is team level. Yeah, Dora is team level.
I'm conducting survey. So for what do you spend time? So every half a year, and yeah, you all know the quality of the data, but you see trends. So you can identify teams. So why are you spending 35% of your time for incidents or stability issues, or your bug fix, you have too many bugs and so on. So it means something is not perfect or something is not as expected. Then you can dig into the team and ask questions like, is it the architecture? Is it the technology stack? Is it the experience? Is it sometimes you have more human related problem, they don't talk to each other, so I don't know. So but a reason, or most probably you find something to improve the performance. Yes.
Yeah, and we are doing surveys as well. Like that's how we're but we're not doing surveys where we're generating metrics. So at the moment we're just generating basically feature requests, essentially, right? Like where are you spending most of your time, but we're not tracking it in like a metrics focused way. We're more like pushing it into a roadmap that then gives us an idea of what to work on, and we're doing that periodically. So yeah, that's good feedback.
I personally always try to calculate one KPIs. So imagine you spend €1 in your software delivery team. How much is really from this €1? How much ends up in code? So is it 10 cents? Is it 5 cents? Is it 30 cents, or so on? And that's for me the most interest. So from a management point of view, that's the most interesting part.
And how do you do this? How do you calculate that?
There's a software called Serene, which automatically gives you the indication, or you indirectly you calculate it on your own. So you need how much time do they spend for implementation, bug fix, meetings. You take the team staffing, you talk about the roles and so on, and then you have the personnel cost, you have the tool cost, you have the hosting, whatever. You can take all the costs into account, and then you know how much money you spend, and then it could be very precise, but indication whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 or 30 cents of €1, that's the interesting part.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the stories I always tell, because you should use cloud. So for example, because so using cloud is plus 10 cents. Then have a automated developer platform is maybe plus another 5 or 10 cents. And the rest, I would say the last 10 cents, this is then experience, maturity, and so on of the team, also understanding and a little bit balanced from complexity of the product you own. So there are simpler products and more complex one. So some teams won't reach high numbers due to the complexity of the underlying solution. But
Right. Cool. Very nice. Are there any last minute things that we still have to discuss, given that we only have 3 minutes left? All right. Then I think we'll leave it at that. Next week there's PlatformCon, just so that you allow me to do a little bit of advertisement, which is free. So that is, I think, fair advertisement. But there's a ton of interesting conversations, and there are watch parties around the world. Probably not where you are, Matthias, because there's no critical mass. But there is in several places in America and Europe, and I'll be in London. So if you happen to be in London, pop by. Anyhow, delightful to have had this conversation today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Matthias, for spending the time with us. And I hope this was in any way helpful.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Bye-bye.
Good luck. Bye.
Bye.